July 1945, just outside Fort Riley, Kansas. The prairie wind carried a strange scent. Burnt popcorn, maybe sugar. Ilse Kruger tightened her coat and stepped off the army truck onto the gravel lot, her boots crunching beside a row of women in ill-fitting American military surplice. She blinked in the dimming light, trying to make sense of the distant glow across the horizon. It pulsed like a low fire beyond the trees, flickering in soft blues and oranges. No smoke, no sirens. It wasn't a fire. Corporal Thompson said nothing as he herded the German women toward the barbed wire gate, but he didn't carry a rifle. No one did. One guard waved casually to a jeep passing by, then returned to sipping something from a tall cup with a red-end white straw. The gate didn't even lock. Ilse looked around. 48 German women, most of them from bombed-out cities like Hamburg or Berlin, shuffled beside her. All had surrendered in France or North Africa. Some had been Red Cross nurses, others auxiliaries, a few Luftwaffe signal clerks, but none had expected to be put on a train across a continent, then herded through the American heartland under the open sky. The scent grew stronger, melted butter, something greasy, something sweet. In the distance, engines growled, not trucks, not tanks. The sound was smoother, more rhythmic, almost indulgent. Then Ilse saw them. Cars, dozens of them, moving in slow, orderly rows. Big chrome fenders, rounded roofs gleaming under the moonlight, headlights blinking as they rolled across a flat dirt lot toward a giant screen taller than any flak tower she'd seen in Berlin. "What are they doing?" whispered Ruth, the blonde seamstress who used to make Luftwaffe uniforms before the bombings leveled her village. Ilse frowned. Some kind of parade. "No music," Ruth said. "No flags." They weren't soldiers. They weren't there for a rally. One by one, the cars turned and faced the screen like obedient children in a class. Doors opened. People stepped out, American families, men in shirt sleeves, women in dresses, children running barefoot on the gravel, not a single person in uniform, no barking dogs, no shouted orders. Instead, a quiet hum of laughter, a tinny tune drifting from a metal speaker clipped to a car window. Ilse's eyes narrowed. They're watching something. The screen flashed to life. Black and white shapes danced across it, figures moving faster than any German newsreel. A man in a suit chased a dog down a street. People in the crowd laughed. "It's a movie," someone muttered. Out here in the open. A convoy of Cadillacs rumbled past. One had fins like a rocket ship. A little boy popped out of its back window, waving a half-eaten ice cream cone. The car didn't even stop. The American guard turned to the German women and smirked. "Ain't no one getting shot tonight, ladies. Welcome to Kansas." Behind him, the lights dimmed again. On the screen, an actor kissed a woman in a convertible. Cheering erupted from the parked cars. Ilse stared, her mouth dry. Back home, she'd eaten turnip soup by candlelight in a cellar during the final weeks of the war. Here, people gathered to laugh outside at night without fear. No sirens, no blackout curtains, no hunger. Just cars and light, and stories projected into the night. One woman began to cry. Not loud. Just a quiet, cracking sob like something inside her broke in two. Ilse didn't blame her. Back in Germany, the only thing that lit up the night was fire, bombs, tracers, flares. Here the sky was clean, empty of war, and full of laughter. A theater attendant strolled past with a tray of hot dogs and Coca-Colas strapped to his chest. He wasn't even looking at them, just whistling a tune. Another American boy leaned out of a Chevy window and shouted, "Watch this next part, it's hilarious." Ilse's mind reeled. The trucks, the food, the cars, the guards without guns, the projected stories 10 meters tall. It was as if America had already forgotten there'd ever been a war. She couldn't stop watching. Every pair of German eyes stayed fixed on that flickering screen, unable to look away, as though the sheer absurdity of it might vanish if they blinked. But it didn't vanish. It only got louder. The next scene played, a pie fight, a custard pie in a policeman's face, another cheer from the crowd, one car honked twice in approval, children clapped from inside their sedans. The officer near them laughed. Guess you girls never saw Chaplin before, huh? Ruth shook her head, her voice barely audible. We didn't even have power by the end. Ilse blinked. They come here just to laugh. The corporal shrugged. What else you supposed to do on a Friday night? That sentence hit harder than any propaganda reel. They come here just to laugh. Not for orders, not to be rallied, not to be told what to believe, just to laugh. Ilse's stomach turned, not from hunger but from something deeper. The realization that everything she thought she knew about control, order, and strength meant nothing here. Even the guards didn't care if they watched. No one was shouting. No one was counting them. She could have walked away into the dark prairie. No one would have noticed. And yet she stayed, as did all of them. The screen glowed in their eyes like a campfire from another world. One with hot dogs and chrome and music and movie stars who never looked tired, never looked hungry, never once looked over their shoulders. The projector buzzed as the next reel began. Another car rolled into the lot, then another. They just kept coming. Ilse felt something she couldn't name, something between shame and longing. And when the screen flashed again, this time a cartoon mouse chasing cheese through a labyrinth of doors, she did something she hadn't done since her mother's bakery still stood. She laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was also impossible. She whispered, "This can't be real." The guard turned, looked at her, and grinned. "You'd be surprised what's real here, sweetheart." And then the mouse hit the wall with a clang, and 50 car horns honked in laughter. The sound of 100 car radios humming in unison under the Kansas stars was like a lullaby for a world that had never been bombed. Ilse sat on a bench made from an old plank nailed to 2 stumps. No barbed wire surrounded her now. No officer barked commands, just the projector's soft ticking from behind, and the layered echo of movie dialogue drifting from tinny speakers inside Chevrolets, Buicks, Pontiacs. Someone passed her a paper cup. She looked down. Bubbles fizzed in a dark liquid. "Coca-Cola," the corporal said, leaning on a fence post beside her. "Go on, won't kill ya." Ilse stared, uncertain. Ruth nudged her with a whisper. "That's what the Americans drink, right? In all the posters." The drink was cold, icy. A foreign kind of sweetness filled her mouth, stinging her tongue, followed by something sharp and electric. She coughed, then laughed again despite herself. "What is this?" The corporal grinned. "Liquid freedom." The words caught in her chest. In Germany, sugar had disappeared before the second winter. Coffee had been replaced with roasted barley. Chocolate was a rumor, and cola was something only the Americans had ever really understood. Here, it was handed out like water. Behind her, a girl in a polka-dot dress leaned across the front seat of her father's car, holding hands with a boy in a white t-shirt. Their headlights were off. Their engine was idle, but they were smiling like they had nothing to fear, like the war was already ancient history. "Why did you bring us here?" Ilse asked. The corporal shrugged. "They said you girls were wound up, said you needed something to remind you the world wasn't ending." Ilse's lips parted. "So you show us this." He looked at her. "What else should I show you? A factory? A church?" She said nothing. The projector whirred again. On screen, Gene Kelly danced through a rainstorm, twirling his umbrella with wild joy, his feet splashing in puddles that reflected neon lights. "I haven't seen neon in years," whispered Ruth. "Or dancing," muttered another woman. "I haven't seen anyone smile like that," Ilse said quietly, "since before my brother left for the Eastern Front." The guard leaned against the fence, arms folded. "That's what this country does. We build things, big things, loud things, fast things, but the real trick," He nodded toward the screen. We build dreams. Ilse turned slowly. Is that what this is, a dream? No, he said. That's the point, it's real. The movie ended. The cars didn't move. No engine started. No one honked to leave. Instead, another reel began, this one a cartoon again. A rabbit. A hunter. Another round of laughter rippled through the lot. They stay, Ruth asked, bewildered. They watch 2 in a row. The corporal smiled. Triple feature tonight. Ilse's head spun. 3. He chuckled. People bring blankets, food, they plan for it. She looked again. Families lounged across hoods. Children curled under stars. Teenagers slow danced between bumpers to the rhythm of movie scores bleeding out of speaker grills. 3 movies, outside at night, as if fear was a thing of the past. As if the Reich had never stretched across a continent. As if rubble wasn't the foundation of every city she'd left behind. And no one here even seemed to care where she had come from. The group of German women had now fully sat down, some cross-legged in the dirt, others on crates or the wooden benches. The guards had all backed away, forming loose groups by the snack stand. No one was watching them. There were no dogs, no orders, no chains. Freedom felt unguarded here. Ilse rubbed her arms. How can they be so unafraid? The corporal raised his eyebrows. Because we won. She froze. He didn't say it with cruelty, just truth, a fact. The war was over, the flags had changed, the lines had moved, but more than that, these people had never been bombed, they'd never gone hungry. She looked at his shoes, polished, not scuffed by mud or ash. What happened to the camps, she asked, the ones with men, the real prisoners? He sipped his drink. They're plowing fields, fixing irrigation. Some of them are learning how to drive tractors, some work with cows. Texas ones even help wrangle horses. She blinked. Horses. He nodded. Welcome to America. Suddenly the car's engines turned over, not all at once, but in slow waves like birds leaving a field. Taillights glowed. Exhaust danced above the gravel. One by one, the chrome beasts began to roll out, back into the blackness of the prairie, their headlights cutting tunnels through the night. Ilse looked down. The Coca-Cola was gone. She hadn't even realized she drank it all. Line up, the sergeant called from the truck, but even his voice sounded different, less sharp, less like command, more like suggestion. The German women moved slowly, still watching the retreating cars. The screen faded to white, then black, then nothing. Ilse didn't move. The corporal reached out. Come on, it's getting late. She looked at him. Will we see it again? He shrugged. Maybe if you behave. And with that she followed him. But something lingered in her chest, like a match had been lit deep in the coals of something long frozen. As they rode back in the open truck bed, the wind licked her face, but she barely felt it. Her mind replayed the glowing screen, the laughter, the girl in the polka dot dress holding hands with her boyfriend. The world had not ended, it had merely moved on. And it had done so without her. She clenched the empty paper cup tighter until it crinkled in her hand. That sound was the only thing she heard on the drive back. The next morning, the barracks were different. Not in structure. The cots were still aligned with military precision. The morning whistle still blew, but something had changed in the women. They laughed more. Not loud, not careless, but enough. Someone hummed a tune from one of the cartoons. Another tried, mimicking the dance she'd seen in the musical. And when breakfast came, eggs, toast, and a slice of something called bacon, not a single woman complained. Later, when the trucks pulled up again, Ilse assumed they were headed to another field assignment. But instead, the corporal shouted, "Dress neat, we're visiting town." Murmurs spread. Town. Real town. They were issued blouses, pressed skirts, flat shoes. The guards wore no helmets, no rifles. In pairs, they loaded into buses. Ilse sat by the window, watching as the prairie gave way to paved roads, storefronts, and eventually people. Civilians. An entire town that didn't flinch when the buses arrived. At the general store, the women were told to stay together, but once inside, they were allowed to browse. Shelves, full shelves, lined with cans, boxes, candy, soap. Ilse saw more food in 10 minutes than she had in the last year of the war. A woman behind the counter smiled. "Y'all from the camp?" Ilse nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "Well," the woman winked, "welcome to Kansas." A hand tapped her shoulder. It was Ruth. She held up a postcard, bright colors, a drawing of a cowboy lassoing a bull, with a "Greetings from America" in bold red letters. Ilse took it, staring. The woman behind the counter handed her a pencil. "Go on. You can write to your family." Ilse frowned. "They let us." The store clerk shrugged. "Why not?" Ilse stared at the blank space on the card. What could she possibly say? "Last night I watched 3 movies under the stars, surrounded by laughter. Today I was offered soap without ration cards. Tomorrow I don't know, but it no longer feels like a prison." She didn't write any of that. She simply wrote, "I am alive, and the world is stranger than we ever imagined." The next night they went again. More cars, different films, even more laughter. Some of the women had started calling it the miracle field. Others called it cinema without walls. Ilse called it something else. Proof. Proof that the world outside the Reich had always been bigger, that people could gather without fear, that stories could be told under stars without propaganda, without sirens. That peace was louder than any gun. And when the third movie started, a Western this time with a sheriff who said, "Ma'am, this town ain't big enough for the both of us," before drawing his pistol in a dramatic slow-motion shot, the women erupted in cheers along with the Americans. Ilse sat back, eyes wide, lips parted. Because now she understood. This was more than a movie. It was a glimpse of the world they'd never been told existed. And the Americans weren't hiding it. They were projecting it onto walls of light for everyone to see. The third time they went, the cars were already lined up when the buses arrived. The sun had barely dipped below the horizon, casting long golden rays across the flat Kansas plains, but already there were hundreds of headlights pointing toward the massive screen. Some families had brought lawn chairs and folding tables. One even had a portable grill with hamburgers sizzling on top, the smell of grease and charred meat floating on the breeze and drawing audible gasps from the German women. Ilse stepped off the bus last. Not because she was slow, but because part of her hesitated. That morning she'd found herself humming again. An old American tune she'd heard during the last visit, something about the moon and a raccoon. She didn't know the words, didn't need to. The melody stayed with her like a stone in her pocket. She wasn't sure if that was a good thing. "Come on," Ruth urged, already walking toward the edge of the lot. "We'll miss the funny one." Funny, as if this was routine now. Ilse followed, unsure why her stomach twisted. She'd grown up on strict rules, perfect posture, father's lectures about order and blood and destiny. Her village had posters in every bakery window. Every child recited slogans before eating. Yet here, in this land of neon lights and endless sugar, everything was chaos, lazy and loud and laughing. And yet it worked. The American children ran wild between cars. Teenagers flirted shamelessly under the soft flicker of the screen. No one cared who came from where. No one asked for papers. No one saluted portraits. They just lived. And Ilse didn't know how to feel about that. She passed a group of soldiers off duty, sitting on the hood of a Dodge. One strummed a guitar, singing something slow and sweet. The notes drifted between the movie speakers, threading through the air like smoke. A dog barked from one car. A baby cried from another. Laughter rang out in pockets like small fireworks. Ilse spotted the corporal again, leaning against the snack shack. He held 2 ice cream cones and nodded toward her. She blinked. Don't worry, I already paid, he said, handing her one. The cold shock of the vanilla hit her teeth. Her eyes widened. He chuckled. You never had one, did you? No, she whispered. Not like this, not with cream or sugar. The cone was wrapped in a red paper sleeve. She turned it slowly, examining the strange English words. Why do you do this? She asked. The corporal raised an eyebrow. Do what? Let us come here. Let us taste this. Watch this. She motioned toward the screen where a man in a bowler hat slipped on a banana peel. He licked his own cone, shrugged. Because you're not our enemies anymore. She stared, but we were. He nodded, sure, but not now. And that's it. He gestured toward the field of cars. You think we're gonna ruin a Good Friday night just to remind people there was a war? Ilse didn't respond. The sweetness on her tongue was almost too much. The lightness in her chest even more so. She wasn't sure if it was guilt or relief. Or both. The sky deepened to indigo. Mosquitoes danced. Moths flicked toward the glowing projector beam slicing across the night. The movie changed again, this one in color, a western. Horses galloped across canyons that stretched wider than any battlefield Ilse had ever seen. Cowboys shouted. Guitars twanged. And when the villain challenged the hero in the middle of a dusty street, the children in the front cars shouted, Get him. You got him, Sheriff. The crowd roared when the good guy won. Ilse couldn't help it, she smiled. But as the music swelled and the closing credits rolled, something odd happened. A new reel began, but it wasn't a movie. It was news footage. An American flag rippled, drums rolled, then the black and white images appeared. Buchenwald. Dachau. Camps with striped uniforms, emaciated bodies, mountains of shoes. Ilse's throat closed. Ruth let out a soft gasp beside her. No. The newsreel didn't look away. It showed everything. Bulldozers pushing corpses, American medics holding starving children, women with shaved heads staring past the camera like ghosts. One German woman vomited behind a truck. Another fainted. Ilse sat frozen. The announcer's voice said, These are the crimes we uncovered. These are the truths the world must never forget. No music, no narration tricks, just fact after brutal fact. The American families in their cars grew quiet. Even the children stopped fidgeting. Ilse stared at the screen. Her ice cream dripped unnoticed onto her shoe. She had known, in a way, rumors, whispers, people disappearing, towns that no longer received mail. But to see it. The screen flashed again, Auschwitz. Her hand trembled. Then just as suddenly, the newsreel ended. And the cartoon returned. As if nothing had happened. A rabbit popped out of a hat. A dog danced in circles. The children laughed again. Parents smiled. The spell recast. But not on the Germans. The POW women sat rigid, pale, each trying to process the tidal wave that had crashed through their stomachs. Ilse looked at the corporal. He wasn't smiling. You knew, she whispered. He nodded. You showed us this on purpose. Again he nodded. To humiliate us. No, he said softly, to make sure you know what's real. She turned away, eyes burning. We didn't see this. We weren't there. I believe you. But I wore the uniform. He didn't answer. And that silence was the worst sound she'd ever heard. Back at the barracks, no one spoke. Not that night. Not the next morning. Even breakfast passed in quiet, the bacon untouched, the eggs going cold. One woman began tearing apart her POW blouse at the seams. Another ripped the thread from her camp-issued skirt. Ilse watched them, then stood. She walked outside into the sun and down the long gravel road that curved around the camp perimeter, past the guard tower no one used anymore, past the gate they rarely closed. She reached the edge of the cornfield and dropped to her knees in the dirt. The wind moved through the stalks, the same wind that had carried laughter days before. But now it felt different, because she had seen what lay buried beneath it. And she couldn't unsee it. She stayed there until the corporal found her. "You okay?" he asked. "No." He nodded. "Good, means it's working." She looked up, confused. "This place," he said, "it doesn't forgive, not all the way, but it gives people a chance to see the world as it should be. That's what the drive-in is." Ilse frowned. "A theater." "A mirror," he said. "Sometimes it shows you joy, sometimes it shows you shame, but it always shows you the truth." She let the word settle. Then whispered, "And what if I don't know what to do with that truth?" He crouched beside her. "Then you keep coming back, you keep watching, until you figure out who you want to be in that world." She looked at him. "Even if I wore the wrong uniform?" He nodded, "Especially then." The following week, the drive-in showed It's a Wonderful Life. Ilse didn't laugh much. But she didn't look away, either. She sat through the whole thing, through every scene, every triumph, every sorrow, and when the town rallied at the end to save a man who thought he didn't matter, she cried, not because the story was sad, but because she realized it could have been her story. If her world had been different. And now maybe it still could. When the cars left that night, Ilse didn't just watch them. She wanted to be in one. For the first time. She wanted to be driving. She wanted to pull into that lot not as a prisoner but as a person, a citizen, someone who belonged. She turned to Ruth. "I'm going to learn English." Ruth blinked. "What?" "I'm going to learn every word those movies say. I want to know it all, not just watch it, understand it." And Ruth, eyes wide, nodded, "Me too." And so they did. By August, the Kansas heat hung low over the fields like a soaked wool blanket. Dust curled under every step, clung to every hem, and settled in every crease of the camp barracks. But inside one of those long wooden buildings, a different kind of storm was brewing. Ilse sat on her cot, a dictionary open on her lap. The pages were soft from use, edges curling from repeated fingers flipping between truth and regret, freedom and forgiveness. On the plank wall above her bunk, she'd pinned scraps of paper torn from food cartons and newspapers, each with a word she was determined to master. "Movie," she whispered. Then more confidently, "movie theater." A moment later, Ruth, sitting cross-legged beside her with her own notebook, chimed in. "Drive-in." "Drive-in," Ilse repeated, "to drive in." Ruth smiled. "No guards." Ilse nodded, lips curving slightly. "No shouting." "No shame," Ruth added. They paused. The word echoed between them like a prayer. After the night of the newsreel, everything had changed, not just in their understanding of the war, of themselves, but in how they were seen. They weren't watched like threats anymore, not even by the American guards. When they passed through the mess line, they were offered extra portions. When they walked the dirt perimeter in the evenings, soldiers nodded politely instead of ignoring them. Some had even begun asking how to say things in German. "Dank," a young private had said just 2 nights before, handing Ilse a folded blanket. "Dank for your work at the infirmary." She had smiled, then corrected him. "Dank Ihnen." He had laughed. "Guess we're learning from each other." And maybe they were. The lessons became informal. The guards brought magazines, comics, copies of Life and Saturday Evening Post. One of the women even received a dog-eared copy of Gone with the Wind, and they passed it around like contraband. The corporal brought a radio one day. He set it on a crate and turned the dial. Music spilled out. Big band, trumpets, a woman's smooth, syrupy voice singing something about pennies from heaven. Ilse closed her eyes. For a moment she wasn't in a POW camp. She wasn't in Kansas. She was simply floating, arms open, head tilted back, the music lifting her above the guilt, the shame, the memories. "I want to sing like that," she whispered. Ruth nudged her. "First you need to learn to say what she's singing." Ilse laughed, one miracle at a time. Every Friday night, the buses came. It wasn't a novelty anymore. It was ritual. The women brushed their hair. Some applied lipstick traded from guards for cigarettes. Others tied ribbon scraps in their curls. It wasn't vanity. It was preparation. A kind of ceremony for re-entering that surreal American world where food arrived hot, jokes made sense, and light didn't mean fire. The drive-in never repeated movies. Every week was something new. Clark Gable, Rita Hayworth, Abbott and Costello. Each name etched itself into their memory not as celebrities, but as guides, avatars who showed them how America thought, laughed, dreamed. And always the cars kept coming. Ilse began to recognize some of them. A pale green Ford with twin boys who always fought over popcorn. A cream-colored Chevy with a teenage couple who never watched the films but always returned. A battered truck with a little girl who loved dogs and waved at the German women every time. The girl's name, they learned, was Molly. One Friday, Molly came up to them with a folded sheet of paper. "I drew you," she said proudly. Ilse unfolded it. There were 3 stick-figure women sitting on a bench beneath a movie screen. Above them, a banner in bright red crayon read, "Friends." Ilse crouched, swallowed, then said softly, "Thank you, Molly." The girl beamed, "You talk better now." Ilse laughed, "So do you." Not all was easy. One evening, a farmer came to the theater, noticed the POW group and spat near their boots. "My brother died in Bostonia," he growled, "and you get to watch movies." No one answered. Not the guards, not the women. The man stood there for a long time. Until Molly, the little girl, stomped over and tugged his sleeve. "They're nice," she said. "They laughed at the rabbit and they read books." He looked down at her, then back at the women. Then, without another word, turned and walked away. The heat faded by September. So did the fire in their dreams. One morning, a notice was posted on the mess hall door. Repatriation process to begin. The words hit harder than anyone expected. Some women cheered, others wept. Ilse stood still, reading it again and again. Go back. Back to what? To ruins. To questions they couldn't answer. To people who might not even be alive. At lunch, no one touched their food. The next day, the corporal approached Ilse and Ruth by the gate. "You'll be going soon," he said, "back to Europe." Ilse looked at him. "Do we have a choice?" He hesitated. "A few of you might, if you apply, if you prove useful, but most will go. That's how this works." Ruth asked, "What if we don't want to?" He said nothing. Because he didn't need to. Their final drive-in came sooner than expected. It was a Thursday special showing. The movie was Casablanca. Ilse had heard the name before, in whispers, in the barracks. "The one where they cry at the end," someone had said. The theater was more crowded than ever. Word had spread that the German women were leaving. Ilse sat on the front bench, just like the first night. The corporal brought them Coca-Cola and popcorn. The screen flickered to life. Humphrey Bogart lit a cigarette. Ingrid Bergman entered the bar. And slowly, the women of the Third Reich dissolved into nothing more than women. watching a man give up the thing he loved most for the greater good. By the final scene, every German woman was crying. But not for Rick or Ilse. For themselves. For the lives they would never return to. For the people they could never become. And for the dream they had only just begun to understand. When the credits rolled, the lights didn't come on right away. Instead, a reel began to play. Someone had made it just for them. A silent montage. Clips of their time in the camp. Photos of the women helping in the infirmary, repairing uniforms, teaching guards how to pronounce German idioms, singing American songs out of tune. At the end, the words appeared on the screen in block letters. Goodbye is not the end. Some stories play forever. A standing ovation broke out, from the Americans, the guards, the townspeople. Ilse stood frozen. Molly ran up and hugged her waist. "You'll be back someday," she said. "Right?" Ilse blinked away tears. "Maybe." "You promise?" Ilse bent down. "I promise I'll try." The girl handed her one last drawing. This one showed a row of cars beneath the stars. Above them, a new word in big, bold crayon. Hope. Ilse folded it slowly, pressed it to her chest, and looked one last time at the glowing screen that had, for a brief and blinding season, taught her what it meant to feel again. The morning they left, the sun barely crested the hills, casting a thin gold line across the horizon. No one spoke on the bus. The same roads they'd once traveled in silence now stretched ahead again, but this time the silence was different. This wasn't fear. It was grief. At the gate the guards stood straighter than usual. No rifles, no barking dogs, just quiet nods, a few awkward salutes. One of the cooks handed out wrapped sandwiches. Another soldier tucked Hershey bars into their coat pockets. Ilse clutched the last note from Molly, Hope, drawn in red, white, and blue, and didn't let go. The corporal appeared just before they boarded the train. He had nothing to say at first. Then he looked at Ilse and offered a quiet, "Don't forget the movies." Ilse smiled through tears. "I won't." "And don't forget," he added, tapping the side of his head, "that the world you saw here, it was real, all of it, even if no one believes you back home." She held his gaze. "I'll make them believe." Then the whistle blew. The train pulled away. Through the window, the Kansas fields rolled past, vast and golden and impossibly free. And Ilse whispered to herself, in broken but certain English, "Some stories play forever."